Once a French president, Jacques Chirac, candidly admitted with rare honesty, without Africa's resources, France would be a third world country. Those words, dismissed at the time as rhetorical excess, today return like a haunting prophecy. In August 2025, the unthinkable happened. The flow of uranium from Niger, the mineral that powers France's reactors, its high-speed trains, and its factories, was suddenly cut off. The very lifeblood of French energy independence, an independence long paraded as the envy of Europe, was cut at the source. For decades, Paris sold the illusion that it stood apart from the resource politics that plagued Germany, Italy, or Britain. But behind the surface, its nuclear empire rested on African soil. Now, leaders like Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré and Niger's ruling junta are proving that Africa holds the cards. French industries, once untouchable, are suddenly on the brink of collapse. So what happens when the world's self-proclaimed energy fortress discovers its foundations were never truly its own? What happens when uranium, the invisible backbone of France's nuclear power, is no longer guaranteed? And most importantly, does this crisis finally prove Traoré right when he declared, "France needs Africa, not Africa needs France"? In this video, let's find out. The news hit like an earthquake. In Niamey, Niger's military rulers announced that they were nationalizing the Sommer uranium mine, a site long operated by Orano, the French state-controlled nuclear firm. It wasn't a half-step or a symbolic gesture. It was a declaration that the era of French dominance over Niger's most strategic resource was over. For Paris, this was more than an economic setback. It was a geopolitical thunderclap. The junta accused Orano of siphoning away Niger's wealth, citing the damning statistic that while Orano held a 63% stake in the Sommer mine, it had taken 86.3% of production between 1971 and 2024. To the new rulers, this was theft disguised as partnership, a colonial relic surviving in the 21st century. Their message was blunt. Niger's uranium would no longer be France's lifeline. For Paris, this was shocking. Uranium is the invisible backbone of France's energy system. Its 56 nuclear reactors supply around 70% of the country's electricity, a level of dependency unmatched anywhere else in the West. France's image of energy independence, so often flaunted in European debates, was in truth an illusion held together by Niger's mines. So, when the nationalization announcement was followed by a second bombshell, that all uranium exports to France were suspended immediately, the mask collapsed. Border shipments froze. French mining contracts were suspended. Soldiers loyal to the junta guarded extraction sites once managed by Orano, leaving hundreds of millions of dollars in stranded assets in Niger's deserts. The reaction in Paris was instant. Emergency meetings convened at the Élysée Palace stretched deep into the night. Energy executives scrambled to prepare briefings for ministers. The French press erupted with panic headlines comparing the crisis to the 1973 OPEC oil embargo, when Arab nations brought the West to its knees by choking off petroleum flows. But this time it wasn't oil. It was uranium, arguably even more irreplaceable, since it powered not just factories and homes, but the very nuclear deterrent France prides itself on as a global power. So, to understand why this announcement struck at France's core, one must revisit the roots of its nuclear dependence. The story begins in the 1970s, when the global oil crisis exposed Western vulnerabilities. France, heavily reliant on imported oil, decided to pursue an ambitious nuclear program as the backbone of its energy grid. By the 1980s, the plan was hailed as visionary. While other nations fretted over Middle Eastern conflicts or Russian pipelines, France claimed to stand apart, powered by its own reactors. But there was one glaring problem. France had no uranium of its own. Its nuclear independence depended entirely on imports. To feed its growing appetite, France turned to Africa, where colonial era ties offered easy leverage. Niger became the linchpin of France's nuclear empire. Contracts signed between Paris and Niger in the 1970s and 1980s were deeply asymmetrical. French companies like Areva, later rebranded as Orano, extracted uranium at prices that critics described as exploitative. While French households enjoyed cheap, stable electricity, Niger's mining towns lived in poverty, grappling with unsafe working conditions and radioactive contamination. The uranium wealth that lit Paris left little trace in Niamey. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. To the average French citizen, nuclear energy became a symbol of sovereignty and pride. School textbooks boasted that France was free from the resource blackmail that haunted Germany or Italy. Few realized that nearly 1/5 of France's uranium imports came from Niger. The myth of independence was sustained by keeping this reality hidden. However, for decades, Niger's leaders grumbled about the inequities of the uranium trade, but lacked the leverage to renegotiate. French troops stationed in the Sahel, under the guise of counterinsurgency operations, reinforced the old order. Orano's dominance remained untouched. Uranium flowed north, while aid and military support ensured compliance. That fragile equilibrium shattered in 2023 when a military coup ousted Niger's Western-backed president. The junta expelled French troops, pivoted toward Russia, and began systematically tearing up colonial-era contracts. What followed was a wave of nationalizations, first stripping Orano of operational control of its mines, then taking outright ownership. By 2025, Niger went further still. The suspension of uranium exports to France was not just an economic move, but a declaration of sovereignty. Officials framed it as reparation for decades of exploitation. Uranium, they said, would now serve Niger's people or be sold to partners who respected its terms. In essence, they weaponized the very resource that once symbolized their subjugation. For France, the humiliation was profound. For Niger, the symbolism was electrifying. It was not just about profits, it was about power. A former colony was forcing a permanent member of the UN Security Council to its knees. However, despite the headlines of impending collapse, France did not plunge into immediate darkness. The lights of Paris stayed on. Trains still glided across the countryside. Factories continued humming. But this fragile stability came at a steep cost. Unknown to the public, French energy strategists had long anticipated turmoil in the Sahel. To hedge against instability, they had quietly built strategic uranium stockpiles, enough to keep reactors running for months even if supplies were cut. These reserves bought time, but they were never meant to last indefinitely. At the same time, France scrambled to activate contracts with alternative suppliers in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Canada, and Australia. These deals provided a lifeline but introduced new vulnerabilities. Kazakhstan's uranium came with strings attached, given its proximity to Russia and reliance on Moscow's transport networks. Uzbekistan's industry was still developing. Canada's uranium was stable but expensive. Every shipment that arrived from Central Asia or North America cost more, financially and politically, than uranium from Niger, which sat just across the Mediterranean. The stopgap measures preserved appearances but undermined the very model France had championed for decades: affordable, reliable nuclear energy. Industries began bracing for higher electricity bills. Households were warned of rising energy prices. What had been a pillar of national pride was fast becoming a source of national anxiety. The harsh truth was unavoidable. France had not solved its dependency. It had only delayed its collapse. And while France scrambled, the mood across Africa was triumphant. In Ouagadougou and Bamako, crowds marched in solidarity with Niger, chanting slogans like "Our resources, our rules." Editorials praised the uranium cutoff as a historic victory. For the first time, African leaders were watching a former colonial master scramble to adjust to their decisions. Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré seized the moment, reviving his famous declaration, "France needs Africa. Not Africa needs France. What once sounded like fiery rhetoric was now reality. Other African nations began reconsidering their own resource arrangements. Mali raised questions about its gold contracts. Guinea debated tougher terms for bauxite exports. A continent long relegated to the role of supplier was beginning to see itself as a power broker. The symbolism mattered as much as the economics. For centuries, African resources flowed northward while poverty and instability persisted at home. Now, a single act by Niger had rattled Europe's second-largest economy. It was proof that the balance of power could shift and that Africa's leverage was real. What's more interesting is that the uranium showdown did not remain a Franco-Nigerian affair. Its ripple effects reached global markets. Uranium prices surged on world exchanges, unsettling nations from India to South Korea that are investing heavily in nuclear energy to meet climate goals. Russia and China, already deepening ties with Africa, stood to benefit the most. Both powers saw an opportunity to secure uranium contracts under terms that empowered African sovereignty and diminished Western influence. Moscow and Beijing offered not just trade, but political cover, positioning themselves as partners in Africa's push for independence. For the West, the crisis was a psychological blow. For years, Europe framed Africa as dependent on aid, on security guarantees, on Western partnerships. But in August 2025, those roles flipped. Europe looked fragile. France looked desperate. Africa dictated the terms. What began with stranded uranium trucks in Niger's desert exposed a far deeper reality: the collapse of a colonial bargain that had lasted nearly a century. France's image as an energy superpower was shattered. Its claim to independence was revealed as a myth. Its reputation in Africa, already battered by military withdrawals and rising anti-French sentiment, took another decisive blow. But for Africa, this is only the beginning. Cutting France off is the first step. The challenge now is ensuring that revenues from uranium are invested in development rather than lost to corruption. Sovereignty without prosperity risks being hollow. Yet even if the economic dividends take time, the symbolic victory is undeniable. For once, the colonized dictated terms to the colonizer. For once, Africa held the leverage, and the world was forced to notice. Do you think Africa should cut off more of its resources to Europe until fair deals are made? Can France survive without African uranium? Or is this the beginning of its collapse? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on the fact that with France already scrambling, what happens to the rest of Europe if Africa takes the same stand? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.